Riding a bike can result in very serious injury or even death. This video will show you ways to ride in better control. However, you must decide if the inherent risk is acceptable. Take responsibility for the condition and quality of your equipment, ride in control, and be careful.
Hi, I'm Ned Overend. Mountain biking is a lot more enjoyable if you have confidence in your skills. The key to improving your bike handling is to understand the dynamics of technique. I'm going to demonstrate some techniques and show you some drills that will make you a better rider.
The dynamics of technique rely on understanding how you interact with the bike. By this, we mean how you move your weight around and how you balance. Combined with understanding pedaling and braking efficiency, this creates a framework for studying everything you do on a mountain bike: climbing, descending, turning, and negotiating varied terrain. Many of these skills you can develop naturally through experience. However, conscious study and practice will speed your improvement. You'll have more fun with improved control and confidence. You don't just ride a bike, you interact with it. By moving your arms, shoulders, and hips, you can move your weight around and get the most performance from your bike. You can learn to position your bike and body to maintain balance and optimize traction.
Technical riding requires a wide range of body movements. While seated, your body movements are as such. But when you stand, it increases your range of motion, and it adds the other benefit of absorbing shock through your legs.
Cartoonist William Neely describes it this way: your feet and hands are attached, but your upper body can move around the center of the bike in a cone shape. When you stand, you simply get a bigger cone of movement, which allows you to have more control over the bike. Moving your body around also allows you to shift the focus point of your weight, from seat to pedals to handlebars. You can add weight to either wheel to improve traction for braking, climbing, or turning. You can also take weight off either wheel to roll over obstacles more easily. By springing up, you can unweight both wheels simultaneously. For technical sections of trail, work from the attack position. This is a standing position, bent at the waist with your butt slightly off the seat. You want the pedals parallel with your knees and arms slightly bent to soak up bumps. Keep a firm grip, but allow enough flex in your arms to absorb shock. Stay poised like a cat, ready to pounce. Your body position is one component of improving your bike handling. Another key is balance. When your wheels are rolling fast, gyroscopic forces help with stability. The slower you are rolling, the more actively you must balance the bike. On technical trails, you'll want to concentrate your efforts on keeping traction, getting over obstacles, and making tight turns, rather than on fighting to stay upright. Specific practice helps.
Okay, the first drill I want to talk about is it's called a track stand or a slow race. You start here and you go to the marker as slowly as possible. And what it's forcing you to do is balance the bike with very little or no gyro effect at all. Ideally, if you can just stay in one spot, pedal against the braking and try and come to a complete stop. Try not to move your handlebars quite so fast back and forth. It's going to be close. Yeah, that's good, that's good. You almost came to a complete stop. Try and make those steering adjustments, try and make them a little slower. There's some guys who could take all day to get to that rock.
Balance drills can improve your ability in all slow-speed riding situations, giving you more time to focus on your pedaling form.
Yeah, you got it.
Pedaling efficiently will help you use more muscle groups, apply more force, and even out the power pulses of separate downstrokes. A smoother pedaling motion maintains traction by reducing wheel surges and bouncing.
To incorporate more leg muscle and to smooth out your traction impulses, you want to think of pedaling as pushing down at the top of the stroke, dragging your foot across the bottom like you're scraping something off your shoe, and then driving your knee towards the handlebars.
It's called pedaling in circles, but that's too hard to think about, and in reality, hard to do. Let's focus on 3 key points. You don't have to think about pushing down. That comes naturally. As you reach the bottom of the stroke, concentrate on pulling your foot back, parallel to the ground. For the final phase of power, don't try to pull up. The motion happens too fast for that to work. So instead, think about driving your knee to the handlebars.
A good drill for working on a circular pedaling motion is to take one foot off the pedal and pedal around with the other one.
It's an easy technique to practice. Striving for a circular stroke helps you to maintain momentum so you can ride farther, faster, more efficiently. Of course, you can't pedal efficiently, let alone ride technical sections, without a bike that fits properly. Your bike should be set up for comfort in the attack position. The ideal is a neutral position, so you can easily unweight the front wheel. Too much weight on the handlebars will stress your arms, neck, and shoulders. To get optimum power, you need the correct seat height. For a good initial height, measure your barefoot inseam from the floor to your pelvic bone. Multiply by 0.883 to get the approximate measurement from the bottom bracket center to the top of your saddle. If pedaling causes your hips to rock side to side, then your seat is too high. These calculations should give you a 150 to 160 degree bend behind the knee when you are sitting straight up on your bike with the crank arm and seat tube aligned and your foot parallel to the ground. Some other important measurements include your saddle placement relative to the bottom bracket and the ball of your foot relative to the pedal spindle. From these starting positions, you can adjust for the terrain, your equipment, and personal preference. For performance riding, you might want to try clipless pedals. You'll get a more efficient pedaling style and improved control. Learning how to use your brakes in a variety of terrain is a major part of having control and confidence. Braking to control your speed is a tricky skill, so let's take a closer look. When either brake is applied, your momentum creates downward pressure on the front of the bike, increasing front wheel traction while decreasing rear wheel traction. The fear of grabbing too much front brake results in many riders not using it when they should. Yet with proper weight transfer, the majority of stopping power is in the front brake. In addition to keeping you from going over the bars, shifting your weight back will greatly enhance traction when you use the brakes.
Okay, in this drill, we're going to learn how to maximize our braking traction.
From your starting line, coast without braking down to the spot where you plan to apply the brakes. First, use your rear brake. Stand up on your pedals and get in the crouched position off the saddle. Push your hips back. Experiment with moving your weight back to find the position for maximum braking traction.
Okay, what we notice there is that it's hard to slow down using just your rear wheel. One of the reasons is that you can't get your weight behind the rear wheel, obviously. So what you want to do is get your weight behind the saddle so it's over the rear wheel as much as possible, and then try and modulate with your brake lever so that your wheel is just about to lock up, but still turning a little bit. And that'll be maximum braking traction at your rear wheel.
Next, try using the front brake only. It's your best weapon for scrubbing off speed to maintain control, but you have to know how to use it correctly. The harder you squeeze the front brakes, the farther back you have to adjust your weight. Apply the brake, constantly modulating the pressure. This allows the wheel to keep rolling so you can maintain traction and stay in control. Keep the front wheel straight as it tries to twist.
Okay, so what's obvious from the front brake drill is that you can stop much quicker. We've got all our weight behind the front tire, so it's pushing the tire into the dirt, so we have a tremendous amount of braking traction. But at the same time, it can be hard to control. What we saw happen with Kent was his front wheel got turned a little bit, and then his bike leaned to the side a little bit, and when that happened, with the front brake still on, it caused his front wheel to wash out. So when you're using your front brake, it's important that your bike not be turned and that you be straight up and down.
Try using both brakes together. Again, coordinate the use of your brakes with weight shifting to get maximum stopping power. The art is to find the braking pressure just before your wheels lock up.
Janet, listen for that chirp right before your wheels start to lock up. That's where you get maximum traction. Good.
Effective braking requires a proper setup of your brakes.
There are several different adjustments you can make to your brake levers. One important one is the angle of your lever.
I like the lever set so that in the downhill attack position, there is minimal bend in my wrist. Adjust the brake lever placement so your fingers make contact just inside the bend. Set the pads and reach adjuster for rim contact when your fingers have good force on the lever, rather than when your fingers are extended. I asked John Tomac, cross-country world champion, for his view on braking.
So Johnny, obviously the best way to slow yourself down is getting hard on the front brake. But what advice do you have about people who are trying to get used to using their front brake more?
Well, I would say practice in a straight line and practice grabbing as much front brake as you feel comfortable with and keep increasing that. My front brake is mainly used to slow down the bike. That's where you get most of your braking powers out of the front brake, and that's a really key thing to remember when braking downhill.
Okay, so that's it for the basic skills. Knowing how to brake, pedal efficiently, and position yourself on the bike are the tools you need to advance. Now let's look at using these basics in some specific riding conditions. Climbing steep sections efficiently requires adjusting your position for traction and balance, and utilizing the efficient pedal stroke we talked about earlier. Adjust your position over the bike to match the pitch, length, and surface of the climb. To climb most effectively, concentrate on mastering smooth transitions between a range of sitting and crouched standing positions. By moving around your weight, which is focused near your hips, you can maximize traction. Your body position constantly adjusts to maintain purchase with the rear wheel and steering control with the front. When climbing in the saddle, it's a balancing act for traction and steering. If the front end is light, bend at the waist and lower your chest towards the bars. You can also weight the front end more by sliding forward on the saddle. Using a combination of these two movements keeps enough weight over the rear wheel without losing control of the front. These are subtle adjustments. It's a dynamic front-to-back balancing act. If you have too much weight on the front, your rear wheel breaks loose. Too far the other way, and your front end gets light and starts to wander. To keep the front end down on the ground, bend forward at the waist. If that's not enough, slide forward on the saddle. On the other hand, you'll need to scoot back on the saddle if the rear tire starts to break loose. If you need more power, make a smooth transition to the crouched standing position. Don't stand straight up. You'll take too much weight off the rear of your bike and lose rear wheel traction. Instead, get in the attack position, up off the saddle, staying bent at the waist. Pull back with your arms. Don't pull straight up or you'll pull the front wheel off the ground. In addition to getting more power by using your entire body, you are also increasing your traction by pulling back on the handlebars. Think of the bottom bracket as a fulcrum. Your arms are pulling down and back, helping to pivot and press the rear tire into the ground. Bar ends help lengthen the lever to increase this power. Pedaling efficiently is crucial when you are climbing. If you have a choppy pedal stroke, like pistons pumping up and down, your tire is more likely to break free and you'll lose all your momentum. Remember, drive that leg down, scrape your foot back, drive your knee toward the bars.
When you have climbs with varying degrees of pitch and little obstacles in it, sometimes you need to surge in areas where you can get good traction so that the momentum will carry you through the harder areas.
On steep, loose climbs, choosing the right gear and picking a good line are key factors. Look ahead for sections of smooth rock or hard dirt for optimum traction.
A lot of the times the key to getting up sandy climbs is finding spots that have better traction so you can get through the sandy sections.
Choose a gear that allows you to hold the ideal body position on the climb. Too easy a gear will give you a fast cadence, forcing you into the saddle and preventing you from using your legs to absorb shock. On the other hand, too hard a gear can lead to a loss of momentum if you hit an obstacle. A common error is riders who shift to the little chainring too soon when approaching a hill climb. This can cause a loss of momentum at the base of a climb where they need it the most. Instead, shift progressively, running through the gears one or two at a time. We have 24 gears. Let's use them. Balance is important to making it up over steep technical sections. Don't be afraid to go slow and steady in an easier gear.
Some of these steep sections here are a good example of why having balance on your bike makes it easier to climb hills. When you're in these granny gear sections and you're going really slow, if you're practiced at balancing your bike, then you can concentrate on things like traction and power and not just on staying upright.
Long hill climbs are easier if you have an efficient pedaling style and a relaxed body position. Head into a long climb a little conservatively so you can establish a breathing rhythm. Stay relaxed to not waste energy, but change your position occasionally to let other muscle groups do the work. Don't start out with too fast a pace. Good pacing can save you some agony and get you to the top quicker. Don't bog down. You want to get into a rhythm, bringing your heart rate up slowly. Start out with an easier gear than you could push on the grade, just to get your system warmed up. Don't tense up. Concentrate on relaxing your neck and jaw. Try consciously relaxing with a forceful exhale. If your chest is tense, it will restrict your breathing. Relaxation translates right down into your chest and allows you to breathe more easily. This also holds true for your arms and shoulders. Of course you have to hold on to the bars, but don't give your handlebar the death grip. Using your bar ends will help you open your chest to breathe more easily. I like to stay seated most of the time on longer climbs because it requires less energy. Your heart rate goes up when you stand because in addition to powering the bike, you're also supporting your body weight. However, standing does allow you to use different muscles and relax the ones you've been using while seated. If your legs need a short recovery period and you have enough traction, you can stand, lock your leg, and just drop your body weight on the pedals to turn the cranks. During a climb, as always, you should focus on pedaling throughout the circle, but you can get additional power by incorporating your upper body. Pull back on the same side of a downstroke to help you use a broader range of muscles. This translates to a natural rhythm from side to side when standing. It's a more subtle motion, pumping your elbows when you are seated.
Attitude is important when you're climbing. A lot of people really dread climbs. They can be uncomfortable and even downright painful at times. But I prefer to think about the positive side of it. All the fitness benefits I'm getting from time spent on the climb.
Descending with confidence demands the proper body positioning for braking, turning, and shock absorption. Position your body to act as a suspension system. Start in the attack position, bent at the waist, knees, and elbows, so your legs and arms can act as shock absorbers. Get your weight back as the grade gets steeper. Moving back and focusing your weight on your feet keeps your weight centered between the tires. This stance will give you confidence and stability. You won't get bounced around, and you'll be positioned to counteract braking forces and unweight the front wheel so it can roll over obstacles. It sounds counterintuitive, but an important thing to remember on descents is to relax. Try to be fluid with your movements. If you're relaxed, with your knees and arms bent, you'll help the tires stay in contact with the ground for more controlled braking and cornering traction. Keep a firm grip with your hands, but make sure muscle tension does not extend up your arms. If your legs and arms are rigid, you'll transmit more shock up to the rest of your body. You can't think or see clearly if you are being rattled around. In the rough sections, you can't have your butt in the saddle because you'll get bounced up and forward. If you're getting bounced around, you won't feel stable enough to ride faster. Stand up on the pedals, allowing your bike to float around beneath you. Your bike will handle very differently when you clamp the seat between your thighs, as compared to when you ride slightly bow-legged. Riding in an open stance with your knees out allows the saddle to float around more. You can reference the seat against your thighs. The rougher the terrain, the more you will want to let the bike float. Train your vision patterns to pick the best lines. Focus on where you want the bike to go, not on where you're afraid it will end up. Scan the trail ahead of you, looking up the trail and back. The faster you go, the farther out front and more often you need to scan. Look to brake in smooth sections where there is better or at least predictable traction. It's more effective to slow down to the appropriate speed and then release the brakes to let the bike roll over an obstacle.
Here's kind of a tricky downhill where what you do with your front brake is going to have a lot to do with how much control you have. What I look to do when I come over this is not be on the brakes when I'm dropping over the ledges, but looking for places where I can get good braking traction after I come off of them. Now here there's some dirt and it would be pretty slippery to get on the front brake hard in these places. But for instance, here is a rock which is going to provide good traction. So I might be off the brake coming over the ledge, on it on this rock where I'm going to get some good traction, and then off it where the traction is kind of loose, and definitely off the brake when I come down to this corner and I've got to make a direction change so that my front wheel can roll through it with traction.
Braking transmits shock up through your body, so when you have the opportunity, especially on long descents, relax your braking fingers. This allows your arm muscles to recover. Even slight pressure on your brake levers keeps those muscles tense. You can hear your levers click out when you release them fully. To minimize shock to your body and to maximize control, you don't want either wheel to lock up and stop turning. A locked up wheel drags across the ground, slamming into rocks instead of rolling over them. This is a perfect scenario to lose control or get a flat. Ride light, with your weight centered between the tires, rather than crushing the tires on trail obstacles. My frequent riding partner and fellow pro racer, Darryl Price, shines when it comes to floating over rocky sections. How do you describe getting through a section where you have a series of sharp rocks in a row?
Okay, the easiest thing to do, Ned, is to center your weight over the two contact patches of the wheels. And that means almost directly or a little bit forward of the bottom bracket. And with front suspension these days, you have a couple to almost 3 inches more of front travel, and mostly the sharp rocks are going to give you a rear flat.
Drop-offs can be intimidating because it looks like the front of the bike will drop away and pitch your upper body forward. For confidence on steep drop-offs, get your body way back to anticipate the front wheel dropping away. You'll be on the brakes right up to the edge of the drop. Then release the front completely. For the best control, stay off the front brake until the wheel is rolling enough to establish traction. Don't just ride off the drop. Instead, push the front wheel down so the bike follows the contour of the ledge. Push the bars away and forward as you drop the front wheel off. For an instant, your chest will be so far back that it might hit the seat. Immediately start pulling yourself back to a more normal stance as you land. Another strategy for dropping off ledges is with speed. As you hit the lip, lift the front wheel. You need to be off the brakes as you come off the lip and have enough momentum to land rear wheel first. It's important to have a smooth landing area and enough room to brake before any obstacles or turns. Practice with short drops on flatter terrain. Walking the drop is always an option, but by using these basic descending techniques, you'll ride with more confidence and control. Like most techniques in mountain biking, turning has many variables. Is the turn banked, flat, or off camber? How tight is the arc of the turn? How much traction will your tires have? The same turn requires different technique at different speeds. In high-speed turns, you need to counteract centrifugal force, while in low-speed turns, you have to use balance to stay upright when there is no gyroscopic effect. To handle the different speeds, you have two distinct methods: turning the handlebars and leaning the bike. Slower speeds require turning the handlebars and front wheel. The faster you go, the more you'll need to lean your bike to turn it, since turning the bars would cause the front wheel to plow or wash out. Let's look at the higher speed turns first. A valuable turning drill is to take one turn and do it over and over, experimenting with different techniques.
This time we're going to go through the turn with our pedals parallel and our upper body angulated to the outside of the turn.
This position is useful for turns where stability and traction are not in question, as well as in rough terrain when you have to be out of the saddle. It also works on bank turns or turns with good traction where you can simply lean with the bike to strike a balance between centrifugal force, gravity, and traction. But at higher speeds on a slippery surface with no berm, keeping your pedals parallel would be unstable, and your tires would want to slide out. Your traction determines how much speed you can carry through a turn and how much body English you will need to keep the tires biting. Angulation helps improve your traction.
You can experiment with body positioning to increase your traction in the turn. Let's try putting our outside foot down at the bottom of the pedal stroke and putting all of our weight on it. Also, angulate your upper body to the outside of the turn. What this will do is put our weight over the tire contact patches and increase our traction.
Press your outside foot against the pedal at the bottom of the stroke to force the bike into the ground. With all your weight on your outside foot, you can do a tighter turn at a higher speed. Your hips should tilt with the bike to the inside of the turn, but your shoulders should remain over your outside foot. Focus all of your weight on the outside pedal. This keeps more weight over the tires, pushing the knobs into the dirt, while still letting the bike carve. Making a successful turn depends on finding the balance between leaning the bike over and weighting the tires to keep them from sliding out. You might want your weight slightly forward to increase front wheel traction.
So when you're going through a turn, obviously we're using a lot of side-to-side weight. Do you weight with your upper body sometimes?
Yeah, what's effective there is for a right-hand turn, weighting your left hand or the left side of your bar, and not actually thinking of drilling it into the ground, but just taking a little bit of pressure off the inside handlebar and transferring it to the outside of the handlebar.
And by doing that, then you're pushing the knobs of the front tire into the dirt.
Yeah, straight into the dirt where you're going to get your contact patch and your traction.
There are other subtle things you can do to help your stability. Point your inside knee into the turn. This helps maintain balance and stability by giving you a wider stance. When you go fast through turns, it's likely your wheels will drift a bit. You don't necessarily want this to happen, but you should be familiar enough with the sensation so you don't overreact and crash.
What we'll want to do if we're going through the turn really fast, especially if it's a slippery turn, is take your inside foot out. This will increase your stability and keep you from crashing if your rear wheel slides out.
With your foot out of the pedal, you have more adjustment for your balance, and you'll get the feeling of better stability at higher speeds. Plus, if your rear wheel goes all the way out, your foot is in position to save a fall.
When you take your foot out of the pedal in a turn and stick your leg out, I think it's comparable to sticking your arms out when you're on a log. It increases your stability and gives you more balance.
If your rear wheel does break loose, you can control the amount of slide by countersteering with the front wheel. Turn your front wheel in the same direction your rear wheel is sliding. This keeps the front wheel rolling so you can control your line and balance.
So a lot of times in turns, you'll have varying amounts of traction throughout the radius of the turn. What kind of little adjustments do you make once you start to maybe lose traction to get it back?
Well, I think your body position is always constantly changing as your traction changes. So a lot of times if you break loose, you may have to adjust your body subtly one way or the other to counterbalance which way your bike's going and try to get your traction back if that's your goal in the turn, which normally it is.
Allowing the rear wheel to break loose and squaring off the turn is an option for places where you don't have to worry about damaging the terrain, like on dirt roads. Get your weight slightly forward, then use the rear brake to initiate the slide. Adjust the amount of slide with counter steer and rear brake modulation. This is not an eco-friendly technique, so don't use it on single track. Regardless of the technique you plan to use, it's crucial to determine how much speed you can carry through the turn. If you need to slow down, then brake hard before the corner. The best line is to set up wide, aiming for the apex of the corner. Then head back toward the outside of the trail as you exit. Think of it as trying to straighten out the turn. You can't always do that, but it's preferable. In the apex of high-speed corners, your tires will often be at the limit of traction. Applying either brake could provoke a slide. To help reduce any inadvertent front brake use, try relaxing your braking fingers. For off-camber turns and anywhere the terrain drops away, you'll need to use extreme angulation to keep the tires sticking. Exaggerate all your techniques to increase traction and stability. Experiment, comparing the different kinds of turns. Try pedals parallel. Try it with your outside foot down and your inside knee out. Try it with a foot out. You will find different turning techniques work better for different traction surfaces, different speeds, and different radius turns. Switchbacks differ from other turns because you have to go slowly. People often have trouble riding the tight ones because a lack of balance keeps them from concentrating on the mechanics of the turn. Remember the track stand balance drill? You can modify it to practice slow and tight turns.
And one thing you'll find, in order to ride a tight circle, you've got to turn your handlebars as far as you can. In order to turn them that far, you got to be going really slow, okay? So you'll be using your brakes, you'll be using a lot of balance.
Your speed has to match the tightness of the turn. Too much speed and you can't make as tight a turn. Tight switchbacks are always going to be this sort of balanced situation.
You see how I'm angling my body out quite a bit to the outside of the turn?
Yeah, that definitely helps.
And that helps you, what that does is when you're turning really tightly, it helps you keep traction.
Point your head and shoulders in the direction of the turn. This will force your hips to the outside of the corner. Your backbone curves with the corner with your neck turned so that you are looking ahead. Descending switchbacks combine the slow speed tight turn with the additional challenge of positioning for a steep downhill that demands precise braking. Keep your bike upright with no lean for better braking and steering control. Slow down before the turn. Choose a route that allows you to pick specific spots to brake. Remember to avoid too much front brake pressure when the handlebars are turned and when you are on slippery rocks and roots. Swing wide just before the turn to leave the rear wheel in place while the front wheel redirects. This helps you buy a little straight section in the middle of the switchback that you can use for braking.
Hi. I forgot to turn.
Riding uphill switchbacks combines the principles we learned in the climbing section, adjusting your weight to maintain traction, with the balance needed through a tight radius turn. Pick a gear to match the tightness and steepness of the turn. Make sure you pick the easiest line, taking into account roots, rocks, and traction. A lot of riders forget this visual discipline. If you only look at your front wheel, you won't be thinking far enough ahead or setting up the correct body posture for a tight turn. When you start your turn, look up for the crux move and then concentrate your vision on the good line, not on the obstacles in the turn. Small obstacles can pose problems at slow speeds. This slow speed maneuvering drill will help you to learn how your rear wheel tracks in relation to your front wheel. With any drill, you have to be willing to push your limits a bit and take the occasional fall.
Perfect!
But your improved steering precision will help you negotiate your rear wheel through obstacles, where a misplaced rear wheel can kill your momentum. It's amazing the extreme sections of trail that can be ridden on a bike. Getting over these obstacles is more a matter of technique and finesse rather than brute strength. The basic technique is in unweighting the tires. Do it by shifting your weight forward and back and changing how much pressure you apply with your hands and feet. In certain critical sections, you'll want to unweight the entire bike. Or you can unweight the front end, then unweight the rear. Let's look at a few different techniques. With all of these moves, it helps to build in a little speed for momentum. The slower you go, the less gyroscopic effect helps your balance. Lowering your saddle increases your range of movement and can shorten the learning curve on more extreme obstacles.
Basic, weight and unweight.
Here's Greg Herbold, downhill world champion and bike handler extraordinaire.
The basic unweight technique is used for clearing small obstacles, roots, rocks, whether above the ground or in the ground. The idea is to have a balanced body position, your feet in the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and lightly spring up with your knees
just enough to unweight your wheels off the ground. When you go at speed, that'll carry you over the obstacle.
Start from the attack position, crouched with your weight on level pedals, arms and legs slightly bent and relaxed. Think of your leg muscles as springs. As you approach an object, press down to load them, then spring up just before you get to it. In the unweighting maneuver, a lot of times your wheels will never even leave the ground. But just because you're loading your legs and then unloading, you take the weight off them so they can skim over obstacles or ruts.
This is really useful on the trails where there's small, technical, rough sections. Instead of just plowing your bike through those, taking all the jolts in your body, you can actually unweight and let the wheels sort of bounce over the obstacles, keeping you in better control.
Timing your launch depends on your speed, so it is a matter of practice. The faster you go, the sooner you will need to unweight. Start out practicing these techniques with non-threatening obstacles, like shadows. You'll find that you can't unweight in high-speed turns because you'll need the traction. Often you'll just have to slow down to deal with obstacles in turns.
The bunny hop maneuver is basically an exaggerated unweight combined with a sucking or lifting your bike up towards your body. It's especially useful for clearing objects that are above the ground, such as logs or rocks or curbs or small animals.
The bunny hop is a different technique than simply unweighting. In unweighting and bunny hopping, your body is acting like a spring. You load the spring and then you spring upwards. The difference between bunny hopping and unweighting is that there's a third motion in bunny hopping, and that is after you explode upwards, you suck the bike up towards your body. Before you hop, get your weight back and compress down. Then you'll lunge your weight up and forward. Think of surging forward to launch your body. Once the front end is in the air, bring the bike through by rolling your wrists forward, pushing through with your arms, and sucking up with your legs. Surge your body through while you push your bike forward. Lunge with your butt and legs to get more height. You weigh over 100 pounds and the bike weighs less than 30. Your bike will follow.
Wheelies are one of the coolest tricks you can do on a mountain bicycle, but they're not just for kids. Knowing how to do a proper wheelie in control enables you to clear and maneuver around all kinds of natural obstacles.
When you're climbing a ledge or any obstacle, the wheelie is the basic technique you will use to loft the front wheel over the object.
The first wheelie technique we're going to talk about is the power stroke wheelie. Basically, this wheelie comprises of three parts. The first part is pushing down, accelerating or power stroking through your forward pedal. The second part is transferring your weight to the back of the seat. And the third part is lightly lifting up on your handlebars. Just as a ground demonstration, it's something like this.
The key to getting your front wheel up is more than just yanking on the bars. Shift your weight slightly back in the saddle. At the same time you pull up the front wheel, give the pedal a sharp downstroke. As you approach the obstacle, make sure you're in a gear hard enough to get some leverage out of a power stroke. Once the front wheel has cleared the object, shift your weight forward. Keep pedaling after the rear wheel makes contact and return to your centered position. At higher speeds, you can loft the front wheel without a pedal stroke to give you more options on a tricky trail section.
One of the techniques I use for clearing larger style obstacles like this log is called the wheelie hop. The idea behind the wheelie hop is to loft or wheelie your front wheel as you approach the obstacle. As soon as your wheel comes either in contact with the log or breaks the plane of the main log, then hopping and lifting your body weight forward in the air, letting your back wheel hit the top of the obstacle, and then easily rolling off to the next session.
Holding a wheelie is an advanced drill for balance. If you are comfortable riding a wheelie, it will be easier to ride over an obstacle one wheel at a time.
So HB is more of a cross-country rider. I've traditionally tried to suck up jumps, spend as much time as I can on the ground. But since I've turned 40, I've been enjoying jumps more and more.
Well, it's about time you learned, Ed. You know, I learned at 4, so I got like 30 some odd years on you, but I think it's about time we showed you how to launch.
Before you start trying your jump technique, I think it's important that you find a good jump with a nice smooth approach, a gradual, gentle lip, and a nice smooth run out and landing area. Trying to practice jumps in areas that aren't designed for jumping will only lead in sure hospital visits. The most important thing on the approach is to pick a smooth line where you won't have to make any adjustments leading up to the jump. Make sure that you're looking at the obstacle you're going to take off of. The important things on the takeoff are to be centered on your bike, both fore and aft, side to side, elbows bent, knees slightly bent, and in a position where you can react to whatever's going to happen when your bike hits that jump. Mountain bikers have a great tendency to be cast iron statues as soon as they get in the air. That's exactly what you don't want to do. Again, when you're in the air, you want to be loose, keep your elbows bent, your knees bent, keep your head up, look where you're going, and don't, like this, don't get scared.
When you are airborne, you can actually improve your sense of stability by balancing your body against the gyroscopic forces of your wheels. Crossing up your front wheel orients you and gives you something to do in the air. Just make sure you straighten it out before you land.
And this is something that takes a little practice. Usually the most smooth landing situations are rear wheel first landing or a flat style landing. The main thing you want to avoid is an endo or a front wheel landing.
Jumping is not necessarily the safest, fastest, or easiest way to stay in control on rough terrain. Often you will want to suck up the big bumps to avoid changes in your trajectory. What you are doing is using your arms and legs to force the bike along the contour of the terrain, while your body mass maintains a level trajectory. Suck it up by sharply pulling up and pushing down the front wheel to maintain contact and control. This technique also works in the opposite direction to smooth out a dip in the trail. We had a chance to ride with world downhill and cross-country champion Julie Furtado.
It's great when you're riding on those days that everything's just clicking in the single track.
Yeah, and those days are usually when you're nice and relaxed and you get through the turns and you don't brake too much and you're in the right gear so you don't stall coming out of the turns. I love those days.
Everything in mountain biking revolves around preserving your momentum, braking, turning, climbing, and negotiating obstacles.
A lot of people think that to be a good mountain bike rider, you need to have a lot of brute strength and power.
Right, and I think that's a misconception because in mountain biking, what you want to do is maintain momentum, and that takes a lot of technique and finesse rather than brute strength.
To anticipate these moves, we'll need good vision patterns. Glance up and scan from the trail horizon back to your wheel for obstacles, turns, terrain changes, and shifting spots. Check the line of your front wheel, then look beyond to the next move. The faster you are going, the farther ahead you must look. A few experiences of looking at the wrong places will convince you of the need for proper vision patterns. Learning to read the trail will keep the mow rolling. A moment of hesitation can kill your momentum. Consider your safety, but sometimes you just have to commit and go for it. One skill that even experienced riders can improve upon is milking momentum from the terrain. This is a loading and releasing in a forward thrust where pedaling isn't practical, sort of like pumping your legs on a playground swing. It's easy to utilize in banked turns where you can store energy in the berm and release on the exit.
A hard concept for me to describe has always been how you milk the terrain for momentum.
It is hard to describe it because You just want to feel for the terrain and not use it too harshly, especially in corners that have berms coming out of it. You want to go in relaxed and accelerate out so that you carry your momentum instead of stalling halfway through.
Shifting gears progressively is another important skill for maintaining your momentum, particularly on a climb.
On this next pitch, I'm going to keep it in the middle chainring to maintain momentum over the obstacle in the middle of this hill, right there. And then shift after it so I can pedal up the steep part.
Proper timing and anticipation will help you avoid misshifts. This is an important thing to remember. Don't use the front derailleur under a heavy load. If you must downshift on a hill, first surge with a few hard pedal strokes. This allows you to take the pressure off the pedals for half a revolution. Then you can shift reliably with less load on the chain. This helps prevent chain suck, which is one of the most frustrating problems to any mountain biker.
Nothing will stop your momentum faster than chain suck.
If you understand what's happening, it's easier to avoid. There's a simple explanation. The chain is made of steel, which is a harder material than the aluminum middle chainring. When you drop the chain from the middle to small ring under pressure, it digs into the aluminum and sticks as you rotate the pedals. It stays with the crank and gets jammed in the frame. Muddy conditions aggravate the sticking problem. Use your rear derailleur to go through the gears in a progressive manner. Wear out those shifters. This way you will maximize your momentum. Strike a balance between too easy a gear that spins out and a harder gear that bogs down. Develop your timing to shift precisely.
One of the things I enjoy most about mountain biking is cruising along a single track, using smoothness and finesse.
Mud is one of the most challenging riding conditions, especially when slippery rocks and roots are involved. It's like riding on ice, but it's in the trees, so when you fall there is a big penalty. It requires subtle weight changes and real attention to stay off the brakes in certain areas. When climbing, stay seated so you can accentuate your smooth and even pedal strokes. You might use a slightly bigger gear to help prevent breaking the rear wheel loose.
I kind of think of mud as similar to when you're driving your car on an icy road.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you have to be very subtle with all your actions when you're riding in the mud. Be very subtle on your braking, descending, and also on your accelerating. By riding subtle, I mean braking very lightly and trying to pedal very smoothly up the hill in a circular cadence.
Yeah, because once you break it loose in the mud when you're climbing, you've lost all your momentum and it's hard to get started again.
Yeah, and if you break it loose descending, you're going to crash.
Right, and then you have to stand up to start again.
Sand is evil. Completely evil.
In sand, staying seated with your weight on the back of the saddle allows you to keep your pedal strokes smooth and to keep your front wheel light. Let the bars float by keeping your arms and hands loose, but keep the front wheel straight. Your turning inputs have to be very subtle, more leaning the body than turning the bars. Head into deep sandy sections with extra speed and in a higher gear so you can preserve your momentum. In longer sections, as your speed slows, shift down one gear at a time and as smoothly as possible. Too easy a gear will cause you to bounce and sink deeper as you pedal. When riding a sandy downhill, you will want your weight to be back even further than you'd normally have it on the same hill with a harder surface. Crashing is part of mountain biking, but if you practice the techniques we've shown you, you'll spend less time on the ground. Practice letting the bike float underneath you, and be prepared to either jump or suck up the bumps. In confined areas, maintain good clearances for your bar ends to avoid brutally sudden crashes. Crashing is often caused by poor use of brakes or using them in the wrong situation. Go back to the braking drills and practice proper modulation and body positions. Remember, at times the safest thing to do is to release the brakes to regain control. This means you need to control your speed well in advance of hard sections.
Howdy.
Keep the tires rolling for maneuverability, control, and stopping power. Get off the brakes to traverse a rut, turn, or to cross other obstacles. Get on them hard and then get off them. Cleats enable you to use more muscles for climbing power and descending control. But a lot of people fall trying to get their feet out, especially going uphill when they have a lot of pressure on the pedals. The solution is easy. Develop the ability to quickly take either foot off the pedal. Use the track stand drill to practice getting your foot out quickly.
And a lot of people, they don't really think about the motion that they're using when they get out of the cleats. The easiest motion, the one with the least amount of friction, is where your foot comes out of the cleat parallel to the pedal.
Practice balancing long enough to take either foot out at any position in the pedal stroke. Anticipate which side will be better for putting your foot down.
Probably the top of the stroke is the hardest area.
If you are new to using cleats, practice lots of releases before tackling technical trails. Adjust or change the cleats or pedals if you are having continued problems. Another way to avoid crashes is by staying aware of your pedal clearance in turns and around rocks. Sometimes you will ratchet or stutter pedal to avoid contact. Timing your pedal is easier when you are in a harder gear because your pedals won't be coming around as often.
Here's a classic example of where you need to time your pedal stroke. We've got a rock here with a bunch of marks on it where you can see that people didn't quite get the timing right. What's critical about this spot is that when you come up on this rock and you hit your right pedal stroke, it throws your weight to the left, and there's nothing to put your left foot on, so you go down into those rocks. When I come up on this rock, I try and time it so that my right pedal is at the bottom of the stroke down here where there's plenty of clearance. And then as I come up over the crux point of the rock, my pedal doesn't have anything to hit.
When you do crash, and you will, it can be serious. A proper reaction can minimize the pain. When you fall at slow speeds, you might want to hang on to the handlebar when you crash, because by sticking out a stiff arm, the shock is sent right up to your collarbone. If you find yourself going over the bars, you might be able to stay on your feet and run it out to safety. When you have to bail at higher speeds, the best plan might be to hit the ground hands first, then tuck your shoulders and roll. In any case, being relaxed can help prevent injury.
Mountain biking is an exhilarating sport, but it needs your cooperation to help keep trails open. Let's be respectful of other trail users, support your local trail access group, and join IMBA, the International Mountain Bike Association. It's critical that you build technique before you build speed. If you ride in control, you and your equipment will last a lot longer.
Practice all of the drills we've shown you. Dedicate part of each ride to improving one component of your skills and be patient with your learning process. You'll be more relaxed and naturally adjust your position to optimize your performance.
We've been working on a lot of the fundamentals of mountain biking technique because after 14 years of riding and racing, I found that using the basics has helped me to improve. Go out and practice these skills and have more fun with your mountain biking.